Jazz, in and of itself, is an inclusive music. One of the beauties of jazz, and people from all types of backgrounds play this music and can play it together. The music is inclusive, and diversity is in the music.
Vinny, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Same here.
And also for me, this is my first time in the library. This is rather a stunning space and a great place to have an archive. Before we dive in,
Yes.
we need a little show and tell. This is a gorgeous instrument here. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. This is an alto saxophone that was donated to us by Benny Carter. His full name was Bennett Lester Carter. And Benny Carter was considered one of the three greatest alto saxophonists in jazz, along with Johnny Hodges and Charlie Parker. He was also one of the architects of what we know as the big band sound, because his writing for saxophones was quite innovative back in the 1920s. Nobody was quite writing for saxophones like that, and he continued that type of writing throughout the entire swing era. He was one of the youngest band leaders. I think he was leading a band in his 20s, actually. He played, of course, with some very legendary players like Fletcher Henderson and McKinney's Cotton Pickers. In fact, he was the musical director for McKinney's Cotton Pickers, which was a band out of Detroit. And then he formed his own big band. He also had the distinction of going to Europe in the 1930s. And he stayed there for a number of years until the war. But he went over to England, and they asked him if he wanted to be in charge, one of the arrangers for the BBC orchestra, BBC Dance Orchestra.
Oh, really?
So he was one of the arrangers for the BBC Dance Orchestra, and he did some wonderful arrangements for them. The reason we got this saxophone is because Edward Berger, who was our associate director for years, his father, Mauro Berger, wrote the definitive biography on Benny Carter, and Ed wrote the discography to go with it. It's a 2-volume set. That's how big this thing is. It's 2 separate volumes. And so Benny and Ed were very good friends, and they continued that friendship. Mauro unfortunately died before the book actually came out, so Ed took over and finished it and actually revised it, because Benny lived no longer than I think anybody thought he would. And also, they became very good friends, and so Benny gave us that saxophone, also gave us his trumpet, and he gave us his original saxophone, which was a C melody sax, which nobody plays anymore. That's an old instrument. And he gave us that. And he also had a big interest in the Institute. He gave us a lot of arrangements. He gave us some other things as well. And he started the Berger Carter Fund. We give grants to people who want to come and study here. And so it's named after him and Mauro Berger. And we added Ed's name on it too. So it's Berger Carter Berger now. It was originally Berger Carter. So that's how we got the saxophone.
That's amazing. I mean, so it's just, that is an object lesson right there on how one thing, one piece of equipment can open the door to all kinds of stories.
Oh, yes.
And this is what an archive is all about.
Exactly.
It's a place of telling stories through reading materials, listening to sound, seeing artifacts like this. So tell us about your position at the university. Let's like open the door, lay the groundwork for people who are going to be watching this interview.
My title here right now is Senior Archivist and Digital Preservation Strategist. It's a relatively new title. I've had a number of titles, considering the fact that I've been working here since 1978. I started out as a cataloguer, basically. So this is my latest title, and what it really means is that I make sure that the digital preservation of audio is handled properly here, because that's a very important thing for us to do. Preserving the sound, because jazz, as you know, is sound. I mean, unlike classical music, it's not necessarily written scores or manuscripts, although we do have that in jazz. It's really the music. That's really where you get the meat and potatoes of this thing. And so we have to preserve this music. And unfortunately, a lot of it was done on formats that were not supposed to last this long.
Right.
Some of them have. I mean, 78 RPM recordings are still here.
Coming back with the hipsters.
There you go. There you go. But we have some recordings on something called lacquer discs, which were basically instantaneous recordings, which were meant to be listened to and basically thrown away. But we've kept them all these years. So all that stuff has to be switched over to a format that will preserve it, because those formats are falling apart. Audio tape, another format which was used. Unfortunately, audio tape does not last. It has a shelf life, and a lot of that's starting to deteriorate. So we have to get that transferred to something else.
And people of a certain age will remember the audio tape getting tangled in the recorder.
Oh, yes.
And the nightmare.
Oh, God.
And trying to roll the tape back and all that stuff. I mean,
That's
it's fragile
just
time.
One of the nightmares.
Yes.
the breaking of the tapes,
Yes.
splicing them to get the whole. It's a big job. So that's one of the things that I do. I'm also I do a lot of reference, jazz reference, because I know the materials. I know them. I mean, I can answer questions without even looking at some of them. In fact, so I know the collection. I'm also the person responsible for acquisitions. So I buy the journals. I subscribe to the journals that we have. I buy the books. I buy the CDs, the DVDs, the video cassettes in the old days. So I acquire all that material.
So when people think of archives, if they think about them, they might be thinking of them as like static things, like they just don't change. It's where things get put, like the storage closet.
Right.
It's not like that at all.
No,
I mean,
it's not.
just it's a living, breathing collection. I mean, obviously.
Yes.
And you are the person who's managing.
Yes. Yes.
And helping. It's really, for me, I think of archivists as storytellers. Like they are assembling the different pieces, and you don't know where the story's going to go. It depends on what the question the researcher is asking.
Exactly.
But you're helping that person along the line.
That's our job.
And that's fabulous.
And we're sort of a hybrid organization in that we are an archive, but we're also a library. So we do both functions. Because we are an archive, we do keep the old stuff. Most libraries toss out the LPs, they toss out the 78s, whatever, because they don't need that. But we have to keep all those older formats.
I love jazz, and I'm coming in and I want to listen to, and I found out, I've done my research, that there's this incredible recording on a 78 vinyl. So I'm presuming I'm going to walk in there, you'll pull it off the shelf, and you're going to hand it to me, and I'm going to sit down and play it. Is it that simple?
It really is that simple.
Okay.
Yeah, because we are a little different than similar institutions in that we actually do let our researchers handle the recordings. Maybe not so much 78s. Okay, because they are shellac, they're fragile.
Yes.
They can break. So unless you really know what you're doing, I tend to do that.
Okay.
I will play it for you, but you can sit in the same room.
Okay.
Whereas other places, you're sitting in a room and somebody in the basement is playing the record and you get to listen to it that way with the headphones.
Right.
And we put you in a room, a sound room, speakers in front of you. We put the thing on the turntable, we play it, you can listen to it. Listen to it as many times as you want to listen to it, and that's how we operate. And that's what Marshall Stearns wanted. He was the original founder of the Institute. He founded this place in 1952. It was in his apartment in Greenwich Village for a number of years before he decided it had to go to an institution like this. And his whole thing was, this is a place for people, anybody, not just researchers, not just people writing articles, or not just people doing radio or TV. It's for anybody. Come off the street, community people, anybody who wants to come in and listen to jazz. We've had that. People come in, I want to hear Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, but I want to hear the LP. They don't want to hear the CD.
Yeah.
So,
I've never heard the LP.
See? So we pull out the LP and we play it for them. Some of these people are very sharp. They know what they like.
When I was an undergraduate, I was taking history of jazz class because I played saxophone. I mean, I have a Selmer Mark VI. And I played in high school and was taking lessons in college. I took a history of jazz class. And I didn't know my history. And I remember very clearly the day the professor introduced us to Miles Davis, and specifically Kind of Blue. And I think it's the most purchased or most famous jazz album, but he explained the layers of nuance and meaning to it that I guarantee most listeners have no idea what's going on.
I'm pretty sure they don't.
And I mention this because one is my own revelation, like, whoa, there is a discipline, an order, a rigor to jazz that is not just some people going in and making stuff up. When I think of jazz, having had this jazz class, I'm thinking of a very American art form with very clear rules that evolved during different eras. But there is a logic and an order to jazz
Yes.
that is not, oh, here's a made-up thing.
Mm-hmm.
How does that translate, all of that, into the world of an archive? Because you're not making it up either. You're organizing things for people to understand. So when I walk off the street, it's not just you, oh, let me, figuring something out on the spot. You're organizing this collection too.
Yeah.
I'm trying to help people understand an archive.
Mm.
So how does that work in your world?
Well, you need to first of all be able to have or be able to provide access to people who do want to know what's here.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. Like I said, I started as a cataloger. So obviously one of the things we were trying to do was get our recordings cataloged in such a way that people can go to a computer and say, oh, I heard something, and they pull it up and they know the title or whatever, and they know that it's in the Institute of Jazz Studies, and they can come and hear it if they come here to do that. The archival collections that we have, and we have a lot of archival collections, meaning collections from musicians who've passed away, unfortunately, and they've given us their stuff, which is manuscript, letters, things of that type. We have finding aids so that we put those online, so people can go online and say, oh, okay, I want something in box 3, folder 5.
Right.
So
it gets that specific.
Right. So we set it up so that you can come in and just know exactly what you want, and we can go and find it for you real quick.
It's just a highly disciplined space. And that's what I want people to understand, that this is...
There's a discipline to it.
Yeah, exactly. You have occupied different roles in this collection, and you've grown up with it.
Yes.
How'd you get here in the first place, though? So
Funny
you said
story.
you started in 78, right?
Yes, 78, yeah.
But how?
Actually, I started before that.
Okay.
My sister went here before me. She graduated. I came in 1972. I knew about the Institute because of her. She told me it was here, and I was into jazz as a kid.
Okay.
I played guitar. My uncle was a jazz guitarist, so jazz was always a part of my life.
Sure.
So I said, oh, Institute of Jazz Studies. So I came here. It was in this building, but it was in the basement. What happened was Marshall Stearns passed away in 1966. I don't think Rutgers was quite ready for it at that point, so they put it in the only space that they had available, which was the basement of this library. So I ran down there to see it, and I was told that a lot of it was still in boxes because there wasn't enough space to take everything out. But the curator was very nice. He showed me what was there and everything. And so I said, I'm going to work here one of these days. Well, I got work study.
Okay.
And I said, where do you think I want to work? Institute of Jazz Studies, man, no place else,
Right.
So I got work there like in 1974 or so. So I was working as a work study student. The director then was Christopher White, bass player and educator who played with Dizzy Gillespie and Nina Simone and others, Billy Taylor. Very nice man, wonderful bass player. He was on the music department faculty as a bass instructor and so on, but he was, of course, a jazz guy. So they made him the executive director of the Institute of Jazz Studies. And he and I moved it from the basement to a building off campus called Bradley Hall, which you probably heard of. And that's where the new home of the Institute was for a long time. And then we moved back over here in 1994, 96. I always forget the dates, but I think it was 94.
But upstairs.
But upstairs, up here. So they
when I hear an archive in the basement in boxes, I wince because that's some bad things can happen in basements and in boxes.
Yes, bad things could happen, but luckily nothing bad happened.
That's great.
And they put us in Bradley Hall, which was a good location because we were on the first floor, so we weren't in the basement, and because it was a warehouse for Prudential. It was sturdy.
Yes.
So it could accept these large stacks of 78s, which are very heavy. So we could do that. That's not the whole story of how I got here, because I graduated in 76 to become a music teacher. Then what happened was the people who were working here at the time remembered me from my work study days. And when they were doing the cataloging project in 78, they wanted somebody who knew jazz, and they would teach the cataloging part to them because they couldn't find a librarian that knew anything about jazz.
Right.
So that's how I got the gig in 78 on a 2-year grant, and that 2-year grant became a 40-year job.
I was going to it's still paying out.
It's still paying out. They couldn't get rid of me.
Well, we're lucky for that. I mean, but this is really important, is that you already knew genres, you already knew instrumentation, you already knew biography.
Oh, yes.
That's not something one just walks out in the street and just picks up.
No.
So in talking about the collection, I mean, you've 40 years, clearly encyclopedic knowledge. The collection is always growing. Are there a handful of your babies, like the things like, wow, this is, like when you come in like, I can't believe we have this. Are there any of those things here?
Are we talking recordings or just artifacts or?
What comes to your mind first of all? I mean, when I walked in, I saw the saxophone. I'm like, wow, that's kind of a showstopper. But if there was just like a thing, like what comes to your mind first?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is a saxophone, believe it or not. It's the Lester Young tenor saxophone.
Lester Young's tenor's here?
Yes, Lester Young's tenor saxophone is here because President was my man and one of my favorite tenor saxophonists. And to see this instrument that he made that beautiful music on, and we have others. Ben Webster's tenor saxophone is here. He's my other favorite. So there you go. And Don Bias's tenor saxophone.
So for a guitar player to talk about saxophones in these ways, I mean, this tells you how special they are.
Yes, well, also because a lot of guitar players, especially after Charlie Christian and beyond, a lot of them use saxophone players as role models.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Christian was a Lester Young fan. He loved Prez, and you can kind of hear it in some of his improvisations. So that's Wes Montgomery. He often said, "I listen to saxophone players more than I listen to guitar players." So a lot of guitar players listen to sax players to get those lines.
Okay.
So yeah, of course I listen too. Why not?
Yeah.
And I just love the music in general. So I could name trumpet players as well. That I love. The Miles Davis trumpet is also gets me going. It's one of the things I like. As far as recordings though, because I had a lot of the recordings at home, there were a few that I didn't have. There was a set called A Study in Frustration, which was a 4 LP set that was done by Columbia Records on the Fletcher Henderson's orchestra. That I love that set. And when I saw that they had that here, I immediately asked the guy, when I came that first day, I asked him to pull it out and play it for me, play me some of the things from that, and he did. And it was just heaven to hear that again, because I didn't have that set at home. It was hard to find. It was kind of print at that point. There are some unissued performances of people like Django Reinhardt and folks like that I didn't know even existed.
Right.
And to hear some of those things was wonderful because it's different than the issued stuff.
Right.
I could go through a whole litany of.
But this is amazing because it's sort of like the stuff you're talking about. I would equate to a modern audience as the outtakes.
Yes.
The things where you might see something that's a little rough, not quite polished, but might also give you an authentic glance into the performer, whether it's an actor or a musician or something like that. And I find those moments really impressive because sometimes you have to listen through some hiss and some background noise, but there's a humanity to them, right?
Yes.
That is not just this perfectly executed thing that's the thing that Columbia's going to sell.
Right.
But you hear about, no, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I remember Jason Moran, the pianist, explaining the creative process for Thelonious Monk. And it's nothing one would ever have expected. And it is about discipline and rigor and diasporic cultural development. It's just it's amazing to see processes at work.
Yeah.
Now, you've mentioned a number of names that, because I'm a fellow jazz fan, I recognize the names.
Good.
And I can understand the importance of what you're listening to, but a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
So, there are some famous names. Like, if I'm not mistaken, we have Count Basie's collection here, or some element.
We have the Count Basie collection.
So talk to us. I mean, that's one of the most famous names in jazz.
Oh yeah.
Why does it matter that we have it? What's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is that number one, he's a Red Bank native. He was born in New Jersey. So we're a New Jersey collections. Well, we're based in New Jersey.
Yes.
We're not really a New Jersey collection. Yeah, we're worldwide, but we're based here, and definitely having that collection because of the Red Bank connection is one thing. The fact that it's just Count Basie, and he played in Newark a lot. Because Newark was a jazz town for a long time, especially during the 30s and 40s. And so he definitely played here many, many times. So it's good to have that collection for that reason. Also, that collection is good because it also gives you insight into his wife, Catherine, who we found out was quite the activist in terms of the social scene for African Americans. And anybody doing work in that collection, if they really want to find something special, look at the Catherine Basie stuff, because there's a lot of stuff in there on her and what she did which is not, of course, brought out in books and stuff because it's Count Basie's the
Yeah,
name,
sure.
unfortunately.
Yeah.
But she worked too, but it was behind the scenes type stuff, and that's interesting. In fact, I want to go through that collection just for that purpose to see more of that stuff. Quite frankly,
You said something that I don't want people to lose track of, is that, and this speaks to the humanity that I was talking about. It's like, okay, the Basie, he's an icon.
Yes.
People know him even if they don't know him, right?
Exactly.
But then his wife was doing things that tell a much richer story about who, not just who she was, of course, but who he was too.
That's right.
And that's the part that archives can do. I remember my first revelation of what an archive was. It's when I started grad school, and I was at an archival site, and then it's a longer story on time to get into, but I had this epiphanal moment when I was looking at some work by James Baldwin, and it was in his handwriting. I'm like, wait a second. James Baldwin wrote in his pen these words on this piece of paper. Benny Carter had in his hands this instrument and was creating magic. And seeing the object helps me connect to virtuosos, helps me connect to the human being. And the archive is the vehicle for that. And I just love that about this. And this is, I think it's just an important part of the architecture of a great university.
Well, I had a similar feeling about like that when we found, or when we got the Armstrong manuscript. Louis Armstrong wrote a manuscript in green ink. He preferred green ink for some reason, and it's in his own handwriting.
Okay.
And it's an autobiography, which he never completed, unfortunately, but it tells his story. He's telling a story, not somebody else.
Yes.
And that's the thing that I really like about that, because I'm not getting it from somebody's filter. I'm getting it directly from Louis Armstrong, and that's one of the things that I love. That's in the back room somewhere. I love that, to see that. I mean, it's just like you said. It's like Louis Armstrong wrote this, So yeah.
And it is there for people to discover.
Exactly.
It is there for people to explore, to get inspired by.
Right.
How does the Institute tell the story that other people need to know about?
Jazz people know we're here. Most of them do. A lot of them do. I wish more musicians did, actually. But we do get musicians that come here. But certainly the people who do research, they know they got to come here.
Yes.
If they want to finish that book or journal article, whatever they're doing. But the folks, just folk, we have to somehow get out to them that first of all, it's not scary. Because some people, they like my wife, for instance, she doesn't really like jazz, right? We've been married 36 years, okay? But she's not a jazz fan. And her complaint is that, I don't understand what they're doing. I mean, they play a melody and then all of a sudden they do this crazy stuff. So you're intimidated by that. But if you sat and really listened, or if somebody explained to you that it's not crazy, what they're doing makes perfect sense. That's something I wish we could sort of get out or do more. Certainly, we have done performances in Clements Place, which is our jazz club, and we've done performances here in the library. I've gotten cultural programming grants to do performances where I invite the community, people to come in and listen, and we have usually the musicians talk between the sets and try to explain what's going on and answer questions and to them, well, most of them, no question is too silly or whatever. They'll answer anything that they can answer.
Right.
And I think that helps getting that out there. We used to have a radio show on WBGO, which was called Jazz from the Archives, and we used that as a vehicle for letting people know that there is an archive here, folks, in Newark, and that if you really want to know more about this music we're playing for you, come down to Rutgers and so on. And that's, I don't know if it really answers your question, but but that's
that is a way to tell the story.
Outreach.
You tell the story through the production of the archive of the genre. This is my first time in this space. I expect to come back.
Oh, I hope you do.
My researching days are kind of in the rearview mirror, but I expect to come back for a performance.
Great.
That means I want an invitation.
Oh, you do.
Okay.
Definitely get
okay.
one. No doubt about it, man.
Because I want to be there just to experience the university and an archive in action.
Yes.
And that helps me tell the story, frankly, of this place. So,
Right.
so much of my work is about talking about a beloved community, thinking about diversity and in being inclusive. How does the archive help me in that regard?
Well, jazz in and of itself is an inclusive music. I mean, one of the beauties of jazz, and the reason why I think it attracts so many people, is because people from all types of backgrounds play this music and can play it together. Even when it was forbidden for blacks and whites to play on stages together, they somehow managed to do it. If not, blatantly out, during working hours,
Right.
they did it after hours.
Yeah.
And then, of course, people like Benny Goodman hired Lionel Hampton and Teddy
Right.
Wilson to play in the band,
Right.
Or to play in a sort of a side group with the band. And
Right.
then eventually, but he did put black musicians in the band. Artie Shaw did something similar. Gene Krupa did something similar. So that was happening, and it's always happening sort of in jazz. I think there's even a rumor that the so-called one of the earliest white bands actually had a black player in the band, except that he was passing. So, but
Yes.
that happened a lot too. So the music is inclusive, and diversity is in the music. I mean,
Yeah.
it's there. I mean, Mary Lou Williams was the first woman arranger, composer to really make a name for herself in the music, although there were others before her that did it too. Lillian Harden Armstrong was Armstrong's wife, Louis Armstrong's wife. There were others as well. They were all part of making jazz what it is. I mean, jazz is jazz because these folks all did what they did to make it what it is. And to me, it's like I don't want to be corny or anything, but it's sort of like a big melting pot, really.
Right.
Of
Well,
all these types of folk coming in and making this music what it is.
It's a genre about bringing people together.
It is.
And inspiring art and
Exactly.
I've been asking you a lot of questions.
Sure.
It's time for you to ask me a question, if you have any, that is.
It's funny. You answered one of my stock questions. Every time I'm on search committees for the library, my question is always, do you like jazz?
Yeah, we answered that
you
one.
already answered that question. But my question to you is, what was it about Rutgers that interested you in wanting that position? I'm just curious to know, what did you see in this place?
No, it's a fair question.
Yeah.
Since my professional life had been at private institutions, I am inspired when I was looking at the profile and thinking about Rutgers. I had already known about Rutgers in my area. It's incredibly strong in my area. I knew about the Institute of Jazz Studies. Not as someone, I never used it, but I knew of it as a really important repository.
Cool.
But what pushed me to the point of, I think I need to put my name in the hat, is that it represents, and I didn't have the words for it then, but I do now, it represents the democratic possibilities of this country. We think about what this country stands for, not the way it always lives, but the way it stands for, is that so much of those ideals are embodied in Rutgers. A place for everyone. If you have the ability to be here academically, stay from a student perspective, we don't care where you're from. We don't care how much money you have. We don't care what language you speak. It's like, come here. And together we do something great. And, not to push this metaphor too far, but that's what jazz does.
Yes.
If you've got the chops, which can be a very steep mountain to climb, but if you
Yes.
got the chops, you can play.
Yes.
And you can come into the band, and together you can do something sublime.
Very good.
That's why I'm here.
I love it.
Thank you
Glad
so much.
Are. All right, man. Don't be a stranger, please.
I will not be a stranger, not
I
at
think
all.
you're the first president that's ever been here, actually. Oh, university president.
Well, they've missed out.
Yeah.